And welcome back to Do I Need a Lawyer? I'm Gary Martin Hayes. Thanks for joining us. Now let's get to a question from one of our viewers. Thanks for taking my question, Gary. Our son-in-law was robbed and then shot and killed in the parking lot of his apartment complex in Atlanta. Our daughter is obviously very upset, and so are we. We are also concerned for our two grandchildren, ages 6 and 4. He only had a life insurance policy through his work for $10,000. This will barely cover the funeral and burial expenses. Here's my question. The apartment where they were living advertises that they have security. You have to have a magnetic card to get through the gate. The guy that shot our son-in-law was not even a resident there, and we've learned that there were other robberies and attacks in the complex too. Do we need a lawyer? And that's from Margaret in Dorville. Margaret, I am so sorry to hear about your loss. Please know that you, your entire family, remain in our thoughts and prayers. Again, I'm sorry. And I'll be honest with you, wrongful death claims are some of the most difficult cases we deal with as attorneys from an emotional standpoint. Through our representation of the family, we learn about that person that tragically lost their life. You learn how much of an impact they had in their family, at work, and in their neighborhood and community. And it's our job to show the insurance company or a jury what the full value of the victim's life would be. Again, I am so sorry. Well, let's take this question in two parts. First, let's look at who has the right to recover for your son-in-law's death, and then we will look at whether or not the apartment complex could be liable for not having adequate security to protect its tenants. Now, in our question, you indicated the son-in-law left behind a wife and 2 minor children. Under Georgia law, the surviving spouse may bring an action for the wrongful death of her spouse. Whenever there are surviving children, the spouse is required to share the proceeds of the wrongful death recovery, whatever compensation we're able to secure through a settlement or verdict with the children. So the surviving spouse is the one that pursues the claim as an individual and as a representative of the minor children. So if your daughter were to hire us, we represent her individually and then on behalf of the children. Now, let's look at whether or not the apartment complex could be liable for not having adequate security to protect its tenants. And negligent security cases are not easy. They are time intensive and they're very difficult. And I'd like to give you 5 ways that we try to show the defendant business owner was negligent in protecting people on its property. The first way we do it, prior crimes. This is the most common way that we can prove the apartment complex is liable for these types of incidents by establishing the apartment complex knew or should have known about prior crimes in the complex. And one way we do this is by securing the crime reports from the local police department through an open records request. Let me give you an example of a case my office worked on a few years ago. In January 2008, a family lived in an apartment complex here in Atlanta. The father was in the parking lot when he was a victim of a robbery and was fatally shot. He did not know the attackers and he was a totally innocent victim. Well, the apartment complex in which he lived heavily advertised, and they marketed the fact that it was reasonably safe and the property was properly maintained. However, our investigation revealed that the complex was not properly maintained, inspected, secured, patrolled, or managed. When more investigation was done about crimes in the area, we discovered that there were 13 armed robberies reported at that complex just in the 2 years before our client's tragic death. The apartment complex was on notice of a serious security problem on their premises, yet they did not do enough to protect the tenants that paid money to live there. The complex failed to take any action to remedy or reduce the danger to its tenants and allowed the dangerous environment on the property to persist. Yet the apartment complex was still marketing the fact that their units were safe. Well, this case settled for a very high confidential figure when the apartment complex and their insurance company was presented with the results of our investigation and a demand package. The second way we do it, the defendant business owner's internal reports. We also look to see if the defendant apartment complex or business had any internal reports which identified prior crimes in the area, as these are admissible in evidence. The third way, what security practices are in place. Another thing we investigate is what security practices the business has in place to actually protect the people that are invited onto its property. We can often establish a standard of care a business should use to protect others by showing what other similarly situated businesses do in the area. If the evidence reveals that the neighboring property owners are taking measures which far exceeds the defendant property owner's efforts, then we can show this evidence to show the defendant's failure to meet the standard of care in providing security. Fourth way, prior victims. We may also interview prior victims of similar crimes at the property or in the area. We can get their names from police reports, and this is especially helpful if the crime occurred at the same location, showing once again that the business knew of that prior incident. And the fifth way is through security experts. These are times where we may hire security experts to help us establish the defendant owner breached that standard of care by not having security. So look, if you have been hurt or a family member has been hurt at a business establishment, you need to call us. We would be more than happy to address your question. It's free, it's completely confidential, there is no obligation. 770-934-8000 or go to GaryMartinHayes.com. And we'll be back with more of Do I Need a Lawyer?